Good morning. Good noontime. We have some pretty exciting stuff happening out at the school coming up here. And one of the things that's happened was about a year ago. Someone someone died, and in their will they left some money to the Oregon Conference Education Department, $350,000. They decided to use that money to provide matching funds for their schools. And so we applied for part of that money, and we received permission. We received $12,500 in matching funds that we get to then match to do some pretty cool stuff out of the school. So we have some really great things happening at the school as far as culture-wise, as far as the students interacting with each other, as far as the students learning, as far as the students being engaged academically and spiritually and physically. And we're trying to tap into the whole person out there and to kind of show that to people, to us, to the families that are there, to new families that might want to come. We're focusing on the campus. So you kind of notice there's a central circle. You first come into the school, and there's some new underneath there. It's not in this picture, but since this picture was taken, already we have new bark dust down underneath there. Already there's new bark dust that's over by the picnic area and along the school and around the school. The parking lot is in need of some repair. I don't know if I was asleep during my asphalt maintenance course in college or what, but there's a lot to know about asphalt maintenance, and I know very little of it, but I do know that our parking lot and our driveway is in need of some assistance. And so the bulk of that $25,000 is we're planning. The school board voted to use most of that to take care of the parking lot. So there's going to be some repaving and some sealant and some coating and things of that nature. And so we're actively pursuing some bids with that. And then also, if you notice the gym we beautifully painted the gym about 4 years ago, and right in between the central cylinder blocks there, kind of those columns, up about 15 courses up, the plan is to put a mural there of Jesus interacting with some people. So when you first come into the school and you see this big, huge canvas, you're going to have this beautiful picture of Jesus interacting with people. And that's what we're about, isn't it? Jesus interacting with people. Another thing that we've had on our minds and our hearts and our dreams is that we've been dreaming about outdoor classroom space. We have lots of indoor classroom space, but Jesus, when he was teaching, some of his most poignant lessons came when he was in nature. And so we have had several incidences where people have been doing harm to the campus and doing harm. So there's been a gate that's been installed by Brent Powers, and then we had a bunch of the blackberry bushes knocked down. And so right over in this area, the dream is to plant fruit trees. And so then the kids can be out there and working within. Gardening is such a powerful tool with education. Just traditional gardens take so much more effort and so much, and it's against our school cycle, right? So the growing cycle and the school cycle are opposite of each other, and that was intentional. About 100, 150 years ago, they did that on purpose. Well, now we want to use the growing cycle. And so we're still against that. So putting in fruit trees, apples, pears, peaches, potentially some cherries, and just having the kids be able to be out there and using that and learning. And then over here on this section of the grounds, we want to put in fruit bushes, lots of bushes, where the kids can be involved with that. And then off to the other side over where Joe and Judy put in that fire pit over there, we want to put in some little cut off stumps and some logs and some little planters and some little stuff so the kids can be outside. They can be doing writing, being inspired by nature. We can be out there, we can be working, we can be using it for science and for Bible and for so many more opportunities. And this is the pile. This pile now, this was 12 yards of bark dust that we ordered and we received. And right now, there's probably maybe 3 left. Most of it has been spread just this week. We've had people out just moving and putting part of it. And so what we're excited about is the opportunity to have the matching funds, $12,500 that we get just by matching that. So if you say, hey, that's exciting, have the kids outside, have the kids having a classroom and taking care of the parking lot, making it look a little bit newer, make sure that we're being responsible stewards and taking care of what it is that God's given to us and what we have taken, so that we're taking care of it. You just think about, you donate $1, it's doubled. You give $5, it's doubled. And it's not just money. So not just the $12,500. If you say, hey, I want to be a part of putting flowers in. I want to adopt a little section and put some flowers. Or I want to be part of putting in these fruit trees. I want to be in charge of putting in this tree. We will welcome you. We welcome you. Come out, be part of that, and just see how this kind of blossoms and grows. And we're really excited about where this is at right now, and the potential of where we have to go. So thank you very much.
I just want to also express, our school, it kind of, in some ways, kind of happens over there. And church life goes on, and you don't necessarily hear a lot about the school, but it's been incredible for me to see the culture that has developed at the school under the leadership of Joel and Kathy and the entire team there. And to just see the impact it has on my daughter, for example, and her interest in being healthy and her interest in sharing Jesus. Some incredible things are happening there. So I wanted to give you the opportunity, if you'd like to express gratitude for what they're doing over there, just indicate that. And I also want to pray for Mr. Bennett, our principal, before he steps down. Father in heaven, I want to thank you for our school and for the ministry that has gone on for so many years and continues to be robust and just really amazing. And I pray that you will bless Joel Bennett as leader over there, as well as the rest of the team, volunteers as well as staff and teachers, and just pray that you continue to build this up. And as we look at this capital improvement project, this campus beautification and the matching funds, I know that you have plans for that too. So speak to us, each of us, if you'd like us to give to that. Thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. So much good going on in life and really in this church community as well as the larger community. I met with local ministerium. I meet with them once a month, and I was there this last week, and it's just exciting to see that God is very active in all corners of this community. Jesus is good. But I want to ask you a question that I think might strike you as odd. Jesus is good. Yes, we're here because we have some belief in Jesus, or at least some curiosity, or maybe possibly somebody drug you here, but most likely you're here because you believe in Jesus. But here's the question that I think is going to strike you as odd. Which Jesus do you believe in? Do you know what I mean by the question? Which Jesus do you believe in? I ask that because every person, I think, has a different view of who Jesus is. So which is the right one? You can usually tell by the way that people treat you which Jesus they serve. Some are a little stricter, and if you get into their teaching, their understanding of who Jesus is, probably they have a picture of a very strict Jesus. Maybe that's you. Some are very, very lackadaisical, and they might listen to your struggles, but they don't really have much interest in your struggles, really, because, hey, whatever, dude. And if you dig into their theology, likely enough, they have a picture of Jesus that is kind of a casual Jesus that doesn't really change your life much, but maybe that's you. And then, of course, there are those who have a kind of nuanced perspective somewhere in the middle, and we could probably paint a number of different pictures of Jesus, and we could say, yeah, I know somebody who believes in that, or, hey, that's the Jesus I believe in. But what's the right one? Back in November, my wife came home from a committee meeting. I never liked committees. It's an odd thing about me, I guess. I'm a pastor. There are lots of committees, but My wife came home from a committee meeting that I didn't have to go to, and it turns out I probably should have gone to this one. Because it was the new Journey to the Cross Planning Committee, and she came home and she said, the committee decided tonight that you're going to play Jesus in the new production. And my first question was, did you suggest that? She said no. And I was very hesitant. It took me a couple of weeks to agree, at least a couple of weeks, to agree that I was actually going to go through with that. And you could imagine the reasons why that would be intimidating, some of which are very valid, you might think, right? I mean, for example, how many years has Roland been Jesus? Like 15, 16? He's an icon. Now, how can I step into those sandals? Whoa. Can't mess with that. I've had many of the kids who have grown up in this community or in this church tell me that when they were young, they thought that really was Jesus. You can't mess with that icon. But no, that wasn't really my hesitation. It was some hesitation. You know, I raised the question this last week at school, why would I be intimidated by that role? And the kids raised their hands with all kinds of good answers, and my daughter raised her hand and said, it's because you don't have a six-pack. And I'll have to admit that thought did cross my mind. And I keep asking the makeup artists if they can draw one on, and that's their response. They laugh when I say that. I'm serious. But no, that was, I had to get over that idea, but that wasn't really my hesitation in trying to depict Jesus. There's also the fact that it's a brand new production. What if it falls flat on its face? I don't want my face on that. But I'm a leader. I don't have the luxury of sitting back and saying, oh, well, let's see if it works out or not. I've got to be part of it. So that wasn't the hesitation. No, as I contemplated the very daunting task of portraying Jesus in this new production, my hesitation was simply this. Which Jesus do I portray? And it became clear that was a relevant question as we began to process through it and began to practice, and there were differing perspectives on how you portray this part or that part of the story based on which Jesus is it. Is it the stern Jesus? Is it the soft Jesus? Is it the Jesus who embraces everybody but still redirects their lives? Which Jesus do you believe in? And as I wrestle with that, for me it comes down to two words: justice and mercy, and how we balance the two. Justice and mercy. And so as we look at John this morning, I invite you to go with me to John chapter 18. As we look at the passage for today's study, I want you to think of those two words, justice and mercy. Because as we sort through how each of those two words relate to who Jesus is, I think if we find the proper relationship between the two, we find a clearer picture of who Jesus is. And the picture of who Jesus is affects everything we do. This is not just an academic question. If I serve a strict Jesus who is ready to get me when I do wrong, then I live in fear. If I serve a soft Jesus who doesn't really care how I live my life, he just loves me and it's all good, then I see no change in my life. But how do we balance the two? How do we make them make sense? John chapter 18, Jesus has gone to trial. As we pick up the story, he's already been presented before the leaders of the Jewish nation, but the political situation was that Rome, the Roman Empire, had taken over their nation, and they were really the final authority. The Jews had no authority to execute anyone, and that's what the leaders of the nation at that time had on their mind as it regarded Jesus. And so we get to John chapter 18, verse 28. If you have a Bible, I invite you to join me there. John 18, verse 28, you see the issue of justice come up. It doesn't mention the word, at least not right away, but it does very much have to do with justice. Jesus has been arrested and he's taken to trial. That's a question of justice. And notice how that plays out. Then they led Jesus from Caiaphas to the praetorium. And it was early morning, but they themselves did not go into the praetorium, lest they should be defiled, but they might eat the Passover. So they were worried, since the Passover was happening, they couldn't go in with the Gentiles, the Romans there, because they would be ceremonially unclean, and so they were concerned about their religious, keeping up their religious duties while they were in the process of murdering a guy. Verse 29. Pilate then went out to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" As we relate to the question of justice, that's the right question, isn't it? The man is being brought to trial. The most basic issue is, what did he do wrong? It should be an easy question to answer if you've brought this guy to trial. So, what accusation do you bring against this man? And notice their response. They answered and said to him, "If you were not an evildoer, we would not have delivered him up to you. He's just a bad guy." No. What specific charge do you bring against him to demonstrate that he's a bad guy? He's just an evildoer. We wouldn't have brought him if he wasn't. Interesting. Verse 31, then Pilate said to them, "Well, then you take him and judge him according to your law. Obviously, you haven't brought any charge. There's nothing here for me." Therefore the Jews said to him, "It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death." Wow. So not only can they not bring a legitimate charge against him, but they've already figured out what the sentence should be. Does this sound like justice? Absolutely not. Verse 32, that the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spoke, signifying by what death he would die. Then Pilate entered the praetorium again, called Jesus, and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered him, "Are you speaking for yourself about this, or did others tell you this concerning me?" Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you to me. What have you done?" He's still after, what's the charge? What's wrong? What has he done? Jesus answered, "This has nothing to do with you." The way he put it was, "My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight so that I should not be delivered to the Jews, but now my kingdom is not from here." Pilate therefore said to him, "Are you a king then?" Jesus answered, "You say rightly that I am a king, for this cause I was born, and for this cause I have come into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice." Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" And when he had said this, he went out again to the Jews and said to them, "I find no fault in him." As far as a charge against him, there's nothing here. "But you have a custom that I should release someone to you at Passover. Do you therefore want me to release to you the king of the Jews?" Then they all cried, saying, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a robber. So then Pilate took Jesus and scourged him. An innocent man, he beat him though. And the soldiers twisted a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and they put on him a purple robe. Then they said, "Hail, the King of the Jews!" And they struck him with their hands. Then Pilate went out again and said to them, "Behold, I am bringing him out to you, that you may know that I find no fault in him." As it regards justice, he's innocent. Then Jesus came out wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe, and Pilate said to them, "Behold the man." Therefore, when the chief priests and the officers saw him, they cried out, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" They're still intent on the sentence without even a proper charge. Pilate said to them, "You take him and crucify him, for I find no fault in him." The Jews answered, "We have a law, and according to our law, he ought to die because he made himself the Son of God." Finally, a charge. Therefore, when Pilate heard that saying, he was the more afraid. and went again into the praetorium and said to Jesus, "Where are you from?" But Jesus gave him no answer. And as the story continues on, it continues the same way. There's this constant searching for a charge. If this man should die, we must know what he's done wrong to deserve death, and they can produce nothing, except that he claims to be God. And according to our law, if he claims to be God, he should die, which was a stretch anyway. You see, I said that this was about justice and mercy, but it seems that justice is not happening here, is it? And the concern for justice is that Jesus isn't getting any. But there's something else happening with justice. The very fact that Jesus isn't getting justice is demonstrating something about God's justice. Let me illustrate. I want to ask, though, before I illustrate, when you think of the word justice, does it give you warm feelings or cold feelings? Kind of both, right? It's a hard question to answer because justice can have that picture of me standing before God or before the court on earth or before mom or dad and answering for what I've done wrong, and they give me justice, which means I get punished. We often associate justice with punishment, but actually, I want to suggest that justice has very little to do with punishment. Justice is really about setting me right or about protecting me. The word justice in the original languages, both Greek and Hebrew, the word that we translate just or righteous, has to do with having life in order. Justice. To set me right or to set things in a way that protect me. I think deep down inside we want justice. We crave justice. Because without it we have no security, no sense of expectation. One of the early life experiences that taught me about justice was one day when I was doing the laundry at home. My dad had told me to quit leaning on the dryer door. It was one that folds down like this, and so if you lean on it, it tends to break. Okay, so he said, don't do that. But laundry wasn't my favorite job, and so I would try to reach in and grab the whole load of laundry all at once and dump it into the basket, because that would significantly cut my time invested rather than having to get 2 armloads out, right? Okay. And so I kept doing it. Even though he said not to lean on that door, be more careful, I kept doing this big armload, and one day, boom, the door broke. Well, Dad came down and he saw that the door was broken. He said, "You leaned on the door, didn't you? I told you not to." And obviously it was broken. I guess it would be hard it'd be hard to get out of this, but I tried. I said, "No, I didn't do it. Don't know what happened. But you did laundry and I didn't do it." And I remember how he let me slide. And how I felt after that. My dad in the eye. Thank you, Scott. Try not to pay attention to him. I'm trying to look my dad in the eye for the rest of the day. I have a feeling they're not listening to me. Good, all right. I'll keep going then. I felt trying to look Dad in the eye, and there were consequences to me being outside of justice. You get what I'm saying? And I realized somewhere along the way that the toll that was having on me, knowing that I had lied to Dad, knowing that I had disobeyed, that I hadn't received any sort of consequences for what I had done wrong, actually didn't make me happy. And so in my 10-year-old mind, I realized that I would feel better if I confessed. So I went to Mom and Dad. I remember very clearly, I was only 10 years old, but there they were in the kitchen, and I just blurted it out. I broke the door. And they looked at me kind of puzzled, and then it dawned on them what I was talking about. And I don't remember if I had punishment or not, but I remember having that moment of reconciliation. Justice. You see, we want justice. And that's justice for me, consequences for me. I think we even want that sometimes. Does anyone else resonate with that? Have a time when you did something wrong and you cleared it up and it felt good? Yeah, we want justice. On the flip side of that, one we can understand a little better is one time, very close to the same period of my life, my brother got a BB gun. And we were given strict rules about BB guns. One of them, very important rule actually, was to not shoot each other. And so I remember one day going out to the ditch behind the house, and we were shooting bees, which is kind of awful if I think about it. But we were shooting bees. Probably not smart either. Shooting leaves off the trees, and Mom called, "It's time to come in for supper." And so we're running inside. My brother's running ahead of me, and he spins around with that BB gun in hand, and boom, shoots me right in the leg. Well, you can bet that I wanted justice for that. And there was justice indeed. He got the BB gun confiscated for a period of time, and that tended to set his behavior right going forward. He didn't shoot me after that. And so we want justice. Justice protects us, and it also sets things right inside. But there's that other cold feeling that's when you try to answer my question, whether you like justice or not, whether you feel warm or cold when you think of it, it's that other side of it that's the problem. Because we all know if justice is the only thing that rules in our lives or in our salvation, then this doesn't turn out well for us, does it? So what do? If you take away justice and the orderliness that protects us and the orderliness that gives us an inner sense of well-being, if you take that all away, then, well, that's no good. But if we maintain justice to the extent that we have to measure up, and if we don't measure up, there are consequences, and we're doomed, then we're all doomed. Thus enters mercy. And the whole story of the cross, I believe, is about mercy. Romans 5 talks about how while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And we sense in those words that mercy. And the mercy is what makes it possible for us to hope. So we can't live without mercy either. Mercy. Another early experience, a little later actually in life, was when I was taking driver's ed. It illustrates mercy, the importance of mercy. Now, it's not as bad as it might sound, okay? But I was the guy who, when I qualified, the day I qualified for my driver's permit, I think it was 15 and a half in the state of Washington. Is that still the case? All right. That very day, I went in and took the test and got the permit. On my 16th birthday, when I qualified to get a license, I went in and took the test and got my license. And so in between there, somewhere, was driver's ed. And for this to line up for me to get my license on my 16th birthday, I had gone through the coursework, and it was time for me to be signed off by the driver's ed teacher. And maybe this was before I don't remember where the sequence was. Maybe the driver's ed came before the permit. I don't remember. Whatever the case, I was there in the car, and I had been doing well, and he said, if you do well today, I'm going to sign you off, and you're good to go. In the back seat was a girl that I knew who was also taking driver's ed, and she was cute. So I might have been a little bit distracted as I was about to pull out on that roadway doing this final test, and suddenly as I was hitting the gas, the car started to stop because the guy in the passenger seat was hitting the brake. And he pointed out that there was a whole stream of traffic coming right at me, and he'd just saved me from a collision. Well, I knew that I had blown it, and I had. He had said that if you do well and don't make any mistakes today, I'll sign you off. But he looked at me after that, and he said, I'll bet you won't make that mistake again. Let's start this thing over. Take a right here and let's circle back around. And we did. And you can bet that I got it right that time. And the girl in the back seat was impressed, I'm sure. But that's mercy. I didn't deserve it, but I got it anyway, and that mercy was empowering for me to go forward and do better next time. Justice and mercy. Justice and mercy. You know, as I read John chapter 18 and 19, what John primarily does there is to tell the story of Jesus' trial and then of his crucifixion. He doesn't spend much time explaining it. It's almost as if John is telling the story through the eyes of the time when he experienced it and leaving the theological explanation for later. But as he describes that moment, in chapter 19, verse 28, I'm suggesting to you that that moment where Jesus died for us had to do with both justice and mercy. Here's the moment. After this, Jesus, knowing that all things were now accomplished, and the scriptures might be fulfilled, said, I thirst. Now a vessel full of sour wine was sitting there, and they filled the sponge with sour wine, put it on a hyssop, and put it to his mouth, so that when Jesus had received the sour wine, he said, It is finished. And bowing his head, he gave up his spirit. You see, Jesus in the story did not receive justice. But neither was he an unwilling victim. I want you to listen to this idea very carefully. Though there is much going on in the story and the reasons why Jesus died for us, one very significant reason is this: so that we could look at the story and know that God is serious about justice, that he was willing to take on what we deserved to maintain justice. Instead of simply forgiving us and leaving us to wonder if justice would ever be reestablished in this universe and if we would ever be protected from the things that are broken and hurt us, he chose to suffer to show us that there are consequences to sin and that he's serious about justice, serious enough that he was willing to pay the consequences of our mistakes, but also that he loved us enough that he wished to extend us that kind of mercy that empowers us to do better. It's all summed up for me in 2 Corinthians. Again, John doesn't really explain the meaning of the story, but Paul does later. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 21. Second Corinthians chapter 5, verse 21. We see both justice and mercy, and it makes it make sense. For he made him who knew no sin to be sin for us. He took our place to satisfy the demands of justice, so that the watching universe, the angels, all of creation, all of humanity could look and know that this God is a God who sets things right and protects us from future pain, justice. But also that this God loves us enough to give us mercy so we had a fresh start. For he made him who knew no sin to be sin for us for this purpose, that we might become the righteousness of God in him. So that we might become the righteousness of God in him. Justice and mercy. As the praise team comes back up, I'd like to just share with you one more story. It's somewhat lighthearted, but I think it illustrates this pretty well. When I entered college, my first degree was auto body repair. And so I had an auto mechanics class, and I had a bit of auto mechanics mojo. I'd grown up around cars, working on cars. Dad had taught me quite a bit. And so as I went into these classes, it was a working shop, and I felt like I had something to prove. I could demonstrate that I was on top of this thing. And so very early on, I could tell that these guys, they were car guys. They liked to rib each other, make fun of each other, and I didn't really want to be the target of that. I wanted to be one of the cool guys, maybe dishing it out, but not really receiving it. That would have been good. And remember a simple task. It was an oil change. I lifted the car up on the lift, hydraulic lift, pretty awesome. And then there was this oil collection device. There was a reservoir below, and this pipe went up, and then there was a kind of funnel on top of the pipe. And I put it up underneath the car, and I loosened the screw, and the oil started to drain. And the teacher had instructed us that there were some stops on the wheels of that you were supposed to press down so that it didn't slide away while the oil was draining. And I knew better, but I thought, it's going to stay there. So I walked away. A few minutes later, as I'm working on something else, I hear the teacher say, "Whoa, what happened over here?" Sure enough, the whole batch of oil from that car had drained out on the floor, just spreading, in a slow spread, kind of like this. And I knew that I was going to get it. And there were a couple of comments, but then something kind of shifted. And the teacher said, "Hey, Aaron, why don't you get the cat sand? It's actually not cat sand, but stuff you pour on there to kind of. Why don't you cat litter? That's what they call it, cat litter." And then somebody else went and got some paper towels and some rags. And one by one, each of these other students, who I was sure were just going to fry me for this stupid amateur mistake, were up to their elbows in this mess, helping me clean it up. And after it was all done, and the teacher in messy too, we were all washing up, the teacher simply said, "Okay, so next time, why don't you put the stops on those wheels?" And I was good. You see, justice and mercy is a redirection of our lives so that we don't have the same messes again. Mercy, that's justice. Mercy is about giving us that second chance. And so once again, I want to read to you this verse. God made him who knew no sin to be sin for us, that we might become the righteousness of God. I invite you to do one of two things or both today. Number one, ask God to help you receive that gift. And number two, extend that same grace to others. Let's talk to him about it as our praise team leads us in song.